While Ukrainians are in European Union countries and think that they are safe, that no one will touch them, that no one will reach them, and that Europe will never deport Ukrainian men back to Ukraine to send them to the front. Against the backdrop of all these events, unfortunately, friends, the reality is a bit different. And in fact, the statement that was made jointly by Zelensky and the Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, has already proven this. And I have put this together especially for you today. In fact, statements made over the past 6 months by 7 European Union countries. Statements about restrictions, returns, deportations of Ukrainian men back to Ukraine so that they would go to fight on the front line. And I would like to discuss all of this today, so please subscribe and like. If you are a Ukrainian abroad and you are between 18 and 60 years old, then this video is definitely for you, or you know someone to send this video to. Especially if you live in countries like Germany, Poland, Czechia, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, or little Luxembourg. It doesn't matter when you arrived, whether you came before the start of the full-scale invasion or after the start of the full-scale invasion. It doesn't matter whether you came fleeing the war or fleeing poverty or how long you've already been in a particular country. If you don't have this country's passport, then definitely the rhetoric that is now taking place behind the scenes between the Ukrainian authorities and the authorities of certain European Union countries may affect you one way or another. In fact, as of today, there are more than 4.3 million Ukrainians with temporary protection in the European Union and Norway. Among them, about 1 million are men of conscription age. These are approximate numbers, because no one provides exact figures. And according to estimates from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, there are about 300,000 men of conscription age living in Poland alone. And today, these numbers have stopped being just numbers. And against the backdrop of a possible war starting in Europe and the serious situation on the front in Ukraine, these numbers are quite large. They have become, a kind of political argument to change certain decisions. And I'm not saying that deportations might start in a week or in a month, or that all Ukrainian men will be deported to the front in 3 months. No, I'm not saying that. But there is definitely work being done, and there are 7 countries and there are 7 decisions that are being made and discussed not in favor of Ukrainians. Absolutely not in favor of Ukrainians, or rather not in favor of ordinary people, right? And let's go through each of them now. So let's start now, and we'll begin with Germany, because this is the country where the largest number of Ukrainian refugees are currently located. This is the country where the largest number of men aged 18 to 23 went after the borders were opened for them in Ukraine. And, in fact, the CSU faction, which is currently part of the ruling coalition, they have already put forward several ideas on paper. Taxpayers cannot simultaneously finance weapons for Ukraine and support those who are avoiding service. And they are making a rather clear proposal. It's the return of men of conscription age. That's it. And yes, as of today, this is a proposal that is also supported by the clear position of Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany. That's it. And this only indicates one thing, that as of today in Berlin they are already saying that such a scheme is being developed, such a scheme may exist. Zelensky also confirmed that Ukrainian and European security services must work together to return men of conscription age back to Ukraine. Because those who are under 25 years old can easily stay in Europe and live abroad. But if you are a man between 25 and 60 years old, then you must return to Ukraine and fulfill your constitutional duty. And we see that even in these statements, no one is interested in your opinion, your perspective, or your decisions. How many years have you already lived abroad? Do you have anything in Ukraine? Is there anything that connects you to Ukraine? No one talks about this. And as of today, this is at the very least pressure. Pressure on Ukrainian refugees, which previously came only from Ukraine. And now this pressure is also increasing from Our second country is Poland. Actually, let's not dwell on the fact that Poland has already been deporting Ukrainians who have violated some laws for quite a long time. And even some minor cases, yes, really minor ones, like the deportation of more than 60 Ukrainians of conscription age from the concert of the Belarusian singer Max Korch in August 2025. When those who violated the rules of conduct at the stadium, in addition to being fined 2,000 zlotys each, were also deported back to Ukraine. That's it. Next, about Poland, what else was said? Polish Defense Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz has repeatedly stated that many Poles are outraged when they see young Ukrainian men in cafes, see them in expensive cars, and see them in luxury five-star hotels. And he says that, and this outrages them because they know how much Poland is helping and how much the aid for Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees is costing them. But at the same time, for some reason, they don't talk about how much Ukrainian refugees are currently contributing back to the Polish budget in the form of paid taxes. And we have already talked about this more than once, that today, according to various estimates, for every zloty invested, the Polish treasury receives from 5 to 8 zlotys in return. And in my opinion, these are just huge amounts, and it's beneficial for Poland that Ukrainians work and spend money in Poland, especially since the demographic crisis is affecting all of Europe. Next, the second statement from a great friend of Ukraine, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, Radosław Sikorski, who also made a statement a few months ago about the fact that receiving social benefits for evading mobilization is not a human right. And his main idea actually is to not reduce, but first of all, to deprive Ukrainians of payments, although it's not clear at all what payments are being referred to. And secondly, it's to introduce similar restrictions for men of conscription age, not only at the level of Poland, but to make them Europe-wide, so that there isn't a situation where, for example, Poland introduces some restrictions and this Ukrainian just gets up and moves, I don't know, to Germany or France or some other country of the European Union, right? So that this doesn't happen, so there isn't this kind of migration. In other words, to tighten the screws as much as possible. That's why such a statement was also made by Sikorski. It was made many months ago. And now we're coming back to it because for some reason this topic is becoming more pressing. And in my opinion, it's becoming popular again. Next, regarding the Czech Republic. The next country we have is the Czech Republic. Actually, starting from July 1, 2025, if you are not working and do not belong to a vulnerable category, after 150 days your payments, well, are reduced. Для українських біженців. You know, in principle, I support the idea of keeping payments only for those who really need them. Who really need them, that is, people who cannot take care of themselves. For everyone else, remove these payments, remove any subsidies and so on, but leave these people alone. Don't talk about how Ukrainians are freeloading off someone or that Ukrainians need to be deported back to Ukraine. Because in Europe, in fact, millions of Ukrainians have found refuge and a new home for themselves today. And every time some rhetoric comes up about sending people back, people no longer understand whether they found a new home or not. And these statements sound especially sad, for example, for people from Mariupol, for people from Bakhmut, for people from Kherson. No one asks them, and no one asks where they should return to, whether they have anywhere to return to, whether they have anything to do there in Ukraine, and so on. And we see that the situation is changing, and it's changing, well, it's changing and changing in a very dynamic way. And today, Ukrainian refugees are being boiled, like boiling a frog. You know, when you throw a frog into a pot of cold water and slowly start heating it up, it will eventually get cooked. That is, the frog will jump out and go on living its life. So, as of today, in my opinion, Ukrainian refugees are being boiled over very, very low heat, and all these statements are not made without reason. Also, as of today, regarding the Czech Republic, 58% of Czechs believe that the country has accepted too many refugees from Ukraine. And these are the official survey figures. аналітичного центру STEM. Next, Norway. Here, quite recently, on February 26, 2026, a government decree was published stating that new applicants, specifically men aged 18 to 60, are no longer eligible for simplified temporary protection. And in general, they must go through an individual asylum procedure where the chance of receiving this protection is minimal. The Minister of Justice stated directly, "We want as many people as possible to stay in Ukraine." Well, this is just a direct statement from Norway. Denmark supports the same idea, because Norway is not part of the European Union, but Denmark is. So they look at Norway, since they're neighbors, and basically do the same thing. Because starting from April 2026, men of conscription age will not receive permits for temporary protection. Those who arrived younger upon reaching the age of 23 will also lose temporary protection. So, 14 regions of Ukraine are currently recognized as safe. By the way, Switzerland did the same thing. They did it quite a while ago. And Switzerland was the first country to start identifying and dividing Ukraine into safe and unsafe regions. The next country is Luxembourg. A small country, a very, very symbolic statement was made there. And basically, this won't affect a large number of Ukrainian refugees, but still, it's a kind of symbol. One of the ministers called what is happening strange. We provide weapons and we also spend money on those who are fleeing from them. And they also openly called for the return of men of conscription age back to Ukraine, to send them to the front in order to continue defending Europe. And the softest of all, actually, out of the 7 countries that made such statements in one way or another, is the Netherlands. There has repeatedly been talk in the Netherlands about developing programs for the voluntary return of Ukrainians back home. All of this is being done, as they reported. All of this should be done on a voluntary basis. And now, sometime, I don't know if it's in April or May, they also have to assess the new conditions, because as of today, even if they say it might be voluntary, we understand that tomorrow they could say it will no longer be voluntary. Also, if we look at the general statements at the level of the entire European Union, we remember that it was officially announced by one of the representatives of the European Union that there would be no forced return. Temporary protection is valid until March 2027, and no one will be divided by age or gender. This was stated at the level of the European Union, but at the same time we see that even countries that are in the European Union either make such statements about some kind of segregation or even make some concrete decisions. And this is probably the biggest threat. The threat for Ukrainians living in the EU is that people don't know what awaits them tomorrow. Because today they make one statement, tomorrow they make another, and the day after tomorrow they might introduce some restrictions or change the rules of the game. This can occur in individual countries or across the entire European Union. And here, in my opinion, the problem is not even whether they will actually deport everyone or not. Будуть якісь масові депортації. By the way, if you want a separate video about this, I can make it as well. Write in the comments if you want me to cover this topic or any other topics. I'll be happy to do it for you. The question here is how people are supposed to plan and organize their lives for a month from now, a year, 2 years, or 3 years. It's absolutely unclear. Because in such a short period of time, let's be honest, for the most part, refugees have no chance at all of getting a passport from another country. Many people are already in Europe with their children. The kids go to kindergartens, schools, and universities. People have already found some decent, stable jobs. Some have even taken out mortgages for their homes. And now, all of a sudden, these kinds of statements are starting to appear, all sorts of different ones. Maybe they don't have any real, let's say, any real basis, and these are just statements. And they might always remain just statements, but on the other hand, we understand that every person living in any country takes it personally and gets stressed. So in fact, they just create stress. That's it. And here's the thing. you need to understand that there is this uncertainty and we need to live with it. Somehow, we need to find ways to live with it, how to, I don't know, coexist with it so that it doesn't affect the quality of our lives. Because on top of that, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, have Ukrainians who went abroad been instilled with an inferiority complex from Ukraine, and this is happening on a massive scale. We've already discussed this more than once. If you want, we can go over it again. Write about it in the comments. That's it. So now this same inferiority complex and this pressure, even moral pressure, are starting to develop already within European Union countries. Like, if you're already abroad, then stay there and keep quiet. And even if some of your rights are being violated, if some restrictions are being imposed on you, you have to sit there with your mouth shut and keep quiet. And this is probably the biggest problem of all the countries in the European Union. For them, sending men of conscription age back to Ukraine is in their own selfish interest, so that Ukraine does not fall, so that Ukraine remains a kind of buffer between Europe and Russia. And so that the Russians spend their resources on capturing Ukrainian territories and not, for example, on capturing the territories of European Union countries. So basically, that's the situation. In the next videos, I also plan to discuss what's currently happening with temporary protection and what will happen to it after March 4. 2027, I've already done this, but there are a lot of very new and interesting details. So what should those who really want to stay here do? Maybe I'll even look into some alternative countries outside the European Union for you. So, if you want a video like that, we'll cover it too. That's it. And, in general, I'll be watching your comments. I always read absolutely all the comments. So, write what you think. Don't use foul language because YouTube deletes that. In general, that's the situation we have today. What do you think about it? Write in the comments. It will be very interesting to hear and read your opinion. I wish everyone a good day. See you.